thanks everyone for joining. We're here today with Soren, who runs Crosshatch. And we're super excited to be chatting with him about memory and in the LLM world, data portability, and all things kind of future of AI and LLMs. So Soren, do you want to just introduce yourself really quickly, how you got to here and what you guys are working on?
Yeah, totally. It's really cool to be here. I'm excited for the conversation. So hey everyone, I'm Soren, co-founder of Crosshatch. We're building the internet's first personalized AI gateway. We allow users to bring their complete context to their favorite apps in just a tap to unlock hyper-personalized experiences for users and better engagement and hopefully even a conversion for brands. I ended up getting here because I worked at, of all places, Walmart. I joined Walmart to work for a former quant from Renaissance Technologies. And at Walmart, we attempted to put groceries on autopilot. We shipped basically a grocery AI agent where the AI agent would anticipate your needs and place grocery orders on your behalf. We convinced 1,000 people to give us their credit card. We placed orders on their behalf. And just what we found is that even Walmart, there's a Walmart store within 10 miles of 90% of all Americans. Like Walmart has like a ton of context on what people want and buy. And it just turned out that even Walmart didn't have enough context to like save busy families time. And so if we're thinking about like, here are all these models that are so powerful, essentially, Claude 4 is amazing. Gemini, I guess we're now at 2.5 is amazing. Clearly like model capability is not blocking. Like what's blocking like AI that's actually anticipatory is just context. And I just personally want like AI to sort of like listen to my context live stream and just do stuff for me. And so Crosshatch is the solution to that. I'll pause there.
That's super helpful. I guess I'd love to walk through a little bit on the Walmart example. Why do you think, with all of the data that Walmart had about folks, they were not successful in predicting behavior? And I guess like what was the missing link?
Yeah.
What could have made that experience better? Like how frequently were you actually able to predict what people wanted to buy?
So what data were we working with? We were working with all Walmart e-commerce purchase data as well as clickstream data. And so I had full visibility. I mean, you might think, oh, like how good could Walmart's data infrastructure be? It's very good. We could see all orders inside of BigQuery. The guy who's running GCP at our GCP instances at Walmart was very good. Walmart has great infrastructure. I think to answer your question, like why were we not successful? Why is Walmart not shipped such a service yet? I think really two reasons. One, people are idiosyncratic. Where our schedules are changing, our tastes are changing. Just like people are idiosyncratic, and so even if you observe, like what people buy, even at a place that's like sort of as popular and as prevalent as Walmart, like just people are just change all the time. And then the other reason is just that, like, what's just also true is that, as successful as Walmart is a Fortune 1 company. They are like, if you cared about predicting grocery patterns and grocery taste, Walmart is probably one of the, if not the best position to do this. At least they have some of the best visibility into consumer, consumer context in terms of consumer staple spending. What's just also true is that people just shop at other places. And so this, like, to me, this really revealed the sort of truth that, I think today, like there's this common pattern or common expectation among startups, certainly among VCs, that the way that you're going to win is going to just capture all of the context. But indeed, like Walmart's basically in the end state. Like Walmart is the end state of capturing all the context. They have captured all of the context. Like they're the best, like anyone could hope to do. And just what's true is just Walmart doesn't have enough context to do it because people also shop at Kroger, they shop at a bodega, they buy takeout, and so even if you observe that people bought milk last week, it might be that they bought and they didn't buy milk this next week. Maybe they bought it at Kroger. It didn't mean that they don't like milk every week. It's just that they bought it at Kroger. And so if you operate within the app paradigm of context collection, you're just gonna start making stupid predictions about people's taste level that just actually reflect like your lack of visibility into a user's full context.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I guess here's actually a question for you, which is, um, uh, do you actually think humans are deterministic? AKA, could we predict every single thing that you would do if you had enough context or data. And I guess like you know who might have something close to this is like the credit card companies because
Totally.
they
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember there was like that company Second Measure that had
Of
like
course.
all of the signals on all of the credit card transactions, and a lot of people, I think this was like 2017-ish when it was like the whole direct to consumer boom, and it was like Casper and like half a
Yep.
dozen Warby Parker and like half a dozen other of these direct to consumer companies. All the venture capitalists were buying second measure data because they would get the
Yep.
credit card data and be like, oh yeah, like Casper is spiking or XYZ, Warby's spiking, and then they would go and they would go and invest in those companies. I guess it's not like the SKU level, but they have Visa, MasterCard, like those folks might have some pretty good data.
Totally. Yeah, I can answer your question maybe in three ways. One, I've seen people joke on Twitter, and I hope you'll pardon my language here. I've seen people joke that if it's actually true that maybe people and their taste, maybe even their personalities, are sort of trend themselves like trending toward the average. That is, I don't know if you saw the piece about New York Magazine about like it must be nice to be a West Village girl. That all these girls in the West Village are dressing in like white tank tops, blue jeans, and Adidas Sambas, and just like that is, and they all go to Pilates and drink Aperol spritzes. If like it could well be that just if you live in you live in the West Village and you are a girl, those are just your tastes, and like you don't need to know anything else about this person in order to provide personalization. Like that could well be. I personally don't want to live in that future. I'm hopeful that we will swing back to one where we're, indeed, I don't live in New York anymore. My sense is New York has sort of become a little boring. So I'm hopeful that, well, maybe the world will become a little bit crazier. I'm not particularly interested in that future. But yeah, I think the credit card companies definitely are good candidates to provide this. I've even heard from marketers that, it sounds like the Visas and the MasterCards of the world are exploring monetizing their data in a marketing context. I think the reasons why you would expect to see this really is because the folks who were doing this in the past, the DMPs of the world, the data management platforms, people like Epsilon and Axiom, who were previously aggregating all of this context, their data increasingly is sort of bad, and they are actually fundamentally middlemen. And so, if they're actually sourcing their data from credit card companies, you start to wonder, particularly given how modern the sort of, data stacks are, like why credit card companies just wouldn't stand up the business internally and cut out the middleman. So I think you're right that credit card companies, aside from their SKU level, they not having visibility into SKU level data, are well positioned to participate here. But if you truly believe in this AI future where it's like everything just anticipates your needs, I think you sort of do need the SKU level data.
Yep, yeah. I think the interesting thing about the LMs, okay, so one way you could view it is actually the LMs have like sucked up everything that was on the internet, and so it is actually like an amalgamation of all of the reflected desires of all of humanity. And then, but I know like we did the fine web and we did all this stuff to like make sure we got good quality data within that, and then we do all of the post-training layers on top of that, so it's like not quite that, but like philosophically it almost is like it is the everything, it is like all people, and then the interesting thing is like when you prompt it to be like play this role, like you are girl in the West Village, and then you can ask it to, do all of the downstream things, like what are the types of things that folks like that would want. So is it like that person is still in there somewhere? You just have to like trigger that identity. We've actually been chatting with a couple companies that this is totally off topic, but we've been chatting with a couple companies that they are focused on building synthetic humans, and that was like one of the weirdest pitches, like most futuristic, like dystopian, pitches I've heard recently. It's basically they'll create synthetic humans that are represented by the LLMs, and then they'll ask them like all sorts of traditional customer survey questions to them. So like, do you like this marketing or this marketing? Like, would you buy this or this? Questions like that, and then they'll run entire panels that are based on just these synthetic humans that they have generated and these synthetic personas. There are some of them that are going down the route of, hey, like we'll use real humans and we'll ask them a battery of questions, and then we'll ask the LLM to replicate them and give all of that in as a context. And then there are some of them where it's like we'll just create fake humans, like we don't even need to interview people. They're in there somewhere. Like I don't know what you think about this, and like maybe the future of what the, like I find this concept like super interesting that like there are all these like humans that are actually like trapped in there, and their reflected preferences are also in there somewhere if you just prompt the LLM correctly to get them out.
Totally. I mean, I guess, I mean, philosophically, like Crosshatch is sort of like, I think a company that sort of rages against like the sort of if you pardon my language, like the basic bitchification of like preferences. Like, like indeed, I feel like Pixar showed us a candidate future in Wall-E where we're all like fat on little transporting like little Waymos, and we're being fed like advertisements and sipping Coca-Cola. And like we basically become, we're no longer producing any value. We are just like, consuming the average. I mean, I'm sure you've seen Wall-E.
Yes,
I
except
think
we're
no.
skinny because everyone's on Ozempic.
And maybe TRT. Maybe we're working out too. Yeah. Well, actually, I understand Peter Thiel's actually on Manjaro now, but yeah, I mean, indeed, just the world I want to live in is one where we're all sort of more agentic, and so in that sense, like, I'm not interested in like simulations of people. I mean, it feels like West Village and even New York City has sort of become a simulation. I'm much more interested in basically allowing the sort of emergent taste of people being projected onto the world, and that's why we create this context layer that's constantly in sync with all of the context, all of the things that you do across all of your applications, so that like we're not actually making inferences about like you as the West Village girl, but like you as the person who have these events in your calendar, and like we're just reading this New York Times article, and just making it much more nuanced.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So you don't believe in like determinism, I guess.
I,
I mean,
I guess not. I
I would
mean,
like to think,
maybe.
I'm a
Yeah.
very unique individual. Like my preferences are not predictable, but I think there is like a certain mimeticness to things. Like I've been thinking a lot about actually like personalization, and the way media has gone in particular has been towards like greater and greater personalization. And then if you remember, like, well, I don't know, like maybe if you think about like the arc of media, it was you got like four TV channels, and then you had like HBO and like a million of these niche TV channels, and then people got segmented into like, oh, like, are they a lost person? Are they a Walking Dead person? Blah blah blah. And then like it's gotten like increasingly stratified, and now like if you want some super niche anime, like you can go find that, and there's like all sorts of tiny little subcultures. But if you like ended with like this personalization that was like NF1, it's actually very lonely. Like no one actually, like, part of the experience of that makes something pleasurable is actually the fact that you're part of a community. Like you can go to a Taylor Swift concert and everyone knows the lyrics, and you feel like you're part of something. And so I don't know, I guess there's like a way, maybe there's a way of creating personalization that feels very like NF1, but still has characteristics where you feel like part of the mimetic qualities might actually be positive in
Yeah.
a
Yeah, I
trend.
think no, I think that's totally fair. I mean, eh, I love Peter Thiel's writing. I mean, in some ways you could say this is sort of, you could interpret Crosshatch as like a rage against Girard, and that we should all be special snowflakes.
What is a
I,
rage against Gerard?
well, just in the sense that like people, Gerard would say that people like things because other people like things, sort of as you're suggesting. People like Taylor Swift because other people do. I mean, indeed, to be clear, I'm not an anti-Swiftie. Please do not come after me. But no, I mean, personally, I rather view Crosshatch as a more like sort of like practical implementation. Like I don't know, Dean. I spent Walmart is actually a very interesting place. Like, Sam Walton was like a great American, entrepreneur, and the culture there is very strong. People spend a lot of time focused on the saving busy families time, save more, live better, sort of, memes almost. And I mean, indeed, Crosshatch in some respect is like an effort to just like save people time. Not like, I mean, you could think of it in this sort of grander coordination setting, but fundamentally, I sort of view it as just like, how do I save time on the internet? How do I like basically spend less time on like sort of doing nonsense on the internet that I shouldn't have to do? Less so around like preference establishment.
Yep. Yeah. Cool. Maybe you can walk through like how Crosshatch is actually going to work, and what it's going to look like for consumers.
Yeah, so you can think of Crosshatch basically as like Plaid for like personal AI or Plaid for context. Crosshatch is like we've stayed away from using like the Plaid for context exactly because so I think when people think of Plaid, they think of the transactions, like at least canonically the transactions API, which app. So when you link your data with Plaid, you link your bank. Plaid and the connecting application uses the say the transactions API. Plaid is basically sending like making like a full sync of your transactions available. And our sense for this AI age is that you're going to want to link your agent to a lot of different apps. And you probably do not want to send a live stream of your context to every single app. That just sort of, I mean, even if you're not like a privacy person, just it sort of seems intense just to like tell everyone everything about everything you're doing. And so the way you should think about Crosshatch, Crosshatch looks just like the experience looks just like Plaid. A user creates an account. They're sort of told how linking works, and then instead of linking banks, they are linking context sources. So Gmail, Calendar, Fitbit, Strava, Aura Ring, YouTube, Reddit, and credit card transactions. So you can get a full view of everything that people are buying, everything that people are doing for exercise, the media that they like. Just this maximal view of context. And this could sound a bit like MCP, and indeed we can wrap Crosshatch in MCP. But what's different about Crosshatch is that we are a personalized inference gateway. So when you link your data to, say, a TripAdvisor, TripAdvisor actually doesn't get, as I was saying, they don't actually get access to your underlying context. They get access to a model, to any model, a Gemini, a GPT model, a Claude model, that can access context in your like linked context that you permissioned, and perform inference over it in a private compute environment to get personalized inference out. So the one way to think about it is like, so for example, OpenAI sounds like they're working on logging with ChatGPT, logging with OpenAI. In that world, you're just accessing OpenAI models and just accessing the context that you've happened to deposit through conversations. Crosshatch is like the meta form of it, in the sense that you can access all context from all applications that you've ever used that happen to have developer APIs or interfaces where we can get access to context, and you can access it through any AI API. And our just sense is that, like, context is going to be portable. It should be able to be accessed on any top model. It shouldn't be bound to models. And so the end user experience is after you go through the login flow, instead of like you log in with Crosshatch, like sites should be able to update themselves according to your entire context. So the goal is that when you arrive at TripAdvisor, you're not just like, personalized based on your IP address, you're personalized based on your complete context.
Yep, yeah. And so in this world, I guess it would be most useful in a world where I don't want to keep necessarily be tied to OpenAI. I don't want all of my data to be tied to OpenAI. I want to be able to port it from Claude to Claude if I wanted to. I want to be able to port it somewhere else. And then is
Yep.
your vision of the future that like all of these individual enterprises have their own AI agents, or because I guess this is most useful in a multi-agent world.
Yeah, I mean, so my sense, yeah, so, well, I guess I would sort of,
Because
if I
like
could
I
repeat
guess
back your, yeah, please.
like in a like if everything ran through Perplexity, like this is a bad example, but like let's say everything ran through Perplexity, Perplexity did all of my travel booking, did all of my XYZ, then I would just need my contacts in Perplexity, for example. Or
That's right.
like if OpenAI moved up into the application layer, which it sounds like they're kind of doing with the because they recently hired the who is he? She Fiji?
Yeah, from
Fiji
Instacart.
from Instacart. So like if they were to build up all the way to the application layer and be like, hey, like I own like this entire I am the travel
Yep.
agent, I am the shopping agent, in that world where they own everything,
Yep.
maybe it's okay that they own all the memory. I mean, I think there
Totally.
are lots of consumer privacy issues why you wouldn't want that to be the case, but like,
Sure. No,
that would be
totally.
fine, maybe.
Yeah, totally. I think we thought about this, I think, in two ways, like one from like a historical perspective, and then just another from a first principles one. I'll start with first principles. So we've thought about like this from like a DRI perspective. Like Sam Lesson has written a little bit about this from his work on Fin, but like 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 I think you have to ask like what is an application? Like an application, in our view, I declare that an application is a wrapper over captured supply and responsibility for delivery of that supply. So like when you are talking to an application, they have captured the delivery of flights on Delta. And they're also responsible for, like, if anything bad happens, you can like talk to this application and they can fix it for you. And I think the thing that's tough about these, sort of agent wrappers, like the Canon Pass of ChatGPT or Perplexity, is that they're actually not a DRI for the underlying application. Like if like you book a flight through Delta on ChatGPT, you can't like talk to ChatGPT and ask them to fix it for you. Like they don't have any authority. You have to like go talk to Delta. So I think that like the confusion of the responsibility boundary will actually make the UX kind of suck, in the sense that it's like, cool, you can book this thing through them, but like if you need to change it or you need like to do something with it, like you're not going to go to this other interface that they don't control. So I think like the DRI thing is like one reason why this might not happen. The other way to think about it, I find this example to be really compelling, is the example from Google Maps. So I don't know if you remember during the ride-hailing wars, like Google Maps aggregated all the ride-hailing companies. You could book a Juno, a Lyft, an Uber, a Via, all through the single Google Maps interface. And you wouldn't even, like in the early days, you didn't even have to leave Google Maps. You could price compare all in that little bar. It would show you exactly the prices where you're starting, where you're going to go. You could just click and you could book it entirely without even leaving the app. And what's worth noticing now is that all those ride-hailing, most of those ride-hailing apps are now out of business. Uber, the market leader, I think they have 75% market share aside from the way most recent rise, is now no longer in Google Maps. You can't book an Uber through Google Maps, even though it's ostensibly a better user experience. And Lyft, the only one, sort of the market loser, if you will, is the only one who's left. And ostensibly they're there because they need to get traffic. So my sense is that even when there's this amazing like new UX paradigm, I'm just going to book it through Google Maps. That's an amazing user experience. Like the market dynamics are such that if you have captured supply like Uber had and you're like a market leader, you're going to probably go to Google and be like, or the candidate aggregator and be like, actually, I don't need your traffic and I'm not going to pay you a referral fee because I'm important. So I think for those two reasons, I'm sort of not so worried about it.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
curious
super
what you
interesting.
think.
I've actually never thought about it like that. Well, I guess like a couple interesting things about that. One is like there is an opportunity for the second place vendor to partner with like an aggregator to drive up traffic because they have kind of like nothing to lose in a sense. And then, but I do wonder like, and then the other thing that's kind of makes me think about is like the ride hail market is one where it's like, they're kind of, it's a duopoly type of situation where you have one player that's like pretty dominant. You have like a smaller second place player. And then, now Waymo, I'm not really sure how that factors into things. But if in markets that are more fragmented, like does the same thing happen? Or do all markets end up evolving into duopolies?
I'm not sure. I do not know. I guess we'll find
I'm gonna go
out.
ask the market
Yeah,
person.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and so are there characteristics of a market that make this true versus not?
Yeah, I mean, indeed, like it's worth observing. Like so Shopify, the Shopify universe, you could say, is very fragmented. It sounds like and it's true that Shopify has long represented inventory on Shopify stores in JSON form. Like you could find the list of products and their availabilities in like a JSON format off I think all Shopify stores. And I think Toby has formalized this to create like a nicer API interface to this structured inventory data. And it sounds like they're feeding that into ChatGPT. And so you could say, well, like, what is the better interface to this sort of fragmented set of products across the hundreds of thousands of Shopify stores, a singular ChatGPT interface or URLs? I think we'll find out. But yeah, I mean, like, I still think brands are going to matter. Right? And particularly from the DRI perspective, it's like how much time are you really saving by like buying Aritzia through ChatGPT versus like going to Aritzia.com? Like, um,
Yeah, it's true. But you'd have to, there's the discoverability component, I think, to your point, which is like, do I even know about Aritzia?
yeah. Well,
Um,
if you're a West Village girl, you definitely know.
that's right. Yeah. Yeah, I actually wonder about this because sometimes, I think people have been talking about like there's like kind of a power law that is potentially going to happen where value is kind of getting acquired or amassed by Anthropics and the OpenAIs of the world, and like power is kind of aggregating there. And therefore the economic returns are also aggregating into potentially like those two companies, for example. But I'm trying to figure out like, is there a way to make like capitalism still work? In call it that next world without the UBI layer. Like I think UBI is actually a reasonably good solution. I feel like the problem is that it's been very like hand wavy. So everyone's like, oh, like
Yeah,
everything's okay, like we'll just redistribute the earning, and we'll tax the AI agents, we'll tax the robots. I think there's another world in which you actually the cost of starting a business actually goes down, and then we just have more businesses, so we
yeah,
have like call it like 10 times as many businesses as we have humans. Every single human has like many businesses, and then like those businesses operate autonomously with like AI agents in the background, and then like humans go, I don't know,
yeah.
like frolic in fields or whatever we do.
I
And
hope
we,
that's
we
yeah,
we play, and then the AI agents do like work on the back, but the economic distributions become a lot more flat than
yep,
the
yeah,
current power law that I think we're
yeah.
on the path towards.
Yeah, well, indeed, I'm making this call from Miami. And yeah, I'm hopeful that I will get to frolic on the beach. I mean, I guess like one response, like, I mean, I guess I should say, I very much admire and appreciate, I think Claude Code is excellent. The sort of contribution and achievement of OpenAI is, cannot be doubted. At the same time, the candidate path of like basically these two or these large companies basically becoming like duopolists or or near monopolies, and all of us have to just end up paying like $20 a month to access like aligned personal AI. To me, actually feels pretty dystopic. Like I think we should sort of lean in. OpenAI's narrative used to be, creating intelligence that's too cheap to meter. China seems to view intelligence as just as something that's as a utility, as part of infrastructure. And like Crosshatch is an attempt to actually make personal AI free. Like our view is that personal AI should be made free, and the way that internet services in the past were made free was by marrying commerce and memory. That's this was Netscape's contribution. They created the cookie, and they basically made e-commerce like a possibility on the internet, and that's what sort of freed us from the MSNs and AOLs of the world. And it appears right now we are on a path to like finding ourselves with gatekeepers to all of the content and all of the commerce in the internet, where everybody has to pay money in order to participate in this new AI mediated network. Indeed, I'm sort of, Miami decentralization guy. I, if we can find a new economic mechanism to make, personal AI actually free for people, where they don't have to pay, like that feels like a much better outcome than one where we just like this is just like the new tax that we all have to pay in order to engage with intelligence. It's a little bit of a tangent, but
Yeah, I think that's a very hopeful future. But I do think like the truth is that the open source models are like pretty damn good though. Like I actually think I don't know if you heard that interview that was like with Dwarkesh and the Anthropic guys, but they were kind of like, oh, well, like, literally, if progress stopped today, I think we could just collect enough data about all the white collar work and do reinforcement learning on each of those things and like be pretty good and on a path to automating a lot of those tasks. And I think it's actually because like white collar work today is actually not that complicated, and it doesn't require like that much intelligence. And so the level that we have, maybe even on the open source side today, is like good enough to perform most of those things. And then the ultra sophisticated models, like the next generation of models, those are being used to solve,
yeah,
nuclear physics, or to solve, I don't know, solve cancer, or like do some really like really push the boundaries of the frontier of human knowledge. But that's level of intellect is maybe not even required for most of the white collar
yep.
automation that we need on the AI
Yep.
agent side.
And actually, you can even see early evidence of this. My belief, just as an aside, my belief is that Claude Code. I think I've mentioned to you, Claude Code operates on MCP, and one of the most interesting specs of MCP. I don't know if it's been further developed, is sampling. It allows, as I understand it, allows a server to request a completion from an AI client. And if you notice at the end of your Claude Code sessions, you'll see, at least it has for me, a division of labor between Claude Sonnet and Claude Haiku. So maybe I'm dumb, but at least when I use Claude Code, most of the work is done by Claude Haiku. Apparently Claude thinks my coding questions are very simple. To be clear, this has been on like side projects, not on Crosshatch, and to be clear, with Crosshatch, we have not vibe coded our authentication mechanisms. Just putting that just putting that out there. But yeah,
It's
I think
okay
we're
if you
sort
have,
of,
by the way. I think the YC came out and said like 90% of the code for like 80% of the company is on YC. Says Patra is like all vibe coded. So
well, I also see notes that like people who vibe coded their auth like have run into just auth seems like something you shouldn't vibe code. I don't know,
yep,
maybe I'm an old
probably not
millennial or
off.
something.
Everything else is
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah, but like it sure seems that AI is already, and the reason I mentioned sampling is because part of the spec allows the server to actually specify what type of intelligence and what speed of intelligence the server requires. So it's possible you can sort of say, I want it to be really smart or only a little bit smart. And so we're sort of already seeing sort of routing over intelligence levels.
Yeah. And the
But
funniest
yeah,
thing is like OpenAI also released that guide that was like when to use various models, so like they're also like, dude, you don't have to for JSON formatting, like you don't need the craziest reasoning model. Like we don't need that for changing this format to JSON. So I
yeah,
think there are a lot of things to your point that it's like a small language model would be more than sufficient for.
yeah,
But it's like trying
yeah,
to figure out like, yeah, what level of intelligence is actually required for what level of tasks. I think that's actually somewhat challenging.
yeah.
Have you
Yeah.
seen any, yeah, AI agent implementations in the wild that are working?
Well, I mean, I think Claude Code is probably one of the best examples of an AI agent that I think a lot of people would agree is working. I mean, I'm a huge Claude Code stan. The vibes are great. It's like my little friend in the terminal. And to be clear, so actually, I got a glimpse of the implementation, the early implementation of Claude Code, and if you use Claude Code, you pay attention to what it does. You don't just like go scroll TikTok as it's working. You'll notice that it declares these tasks, and if you, and I think actually Simon, I can never remember Simon's last name. Simon who writes the very popular tech blog. He actually just released an article yesterday about this, but noted that tasks are actually an example of an agent. I'm really bummed that Anthropic hasn't sort of come out and sort of talked more about this because I think it would really help the industry. But my understanding is that a task is actually a declaration, I believe, of a headless MCP host, or maybe perhaps a headless MCP client, where the client is registered, and the client is a stateless instance of Claude registered with a task like go search. The user wants to know about how this code base works. Like go search it and come back with an answer or something. And then it also dynamically registers all the tools that sort of master Claude believes will be requisite for the service of this task. And the purpose of, and indeed, like basically the task goes off and does these things, like reviews the code base, uses all the tools to answer the question. I don't know if I've seen the prompt of like how this agent knows when the task is complete, but like this is like an example of an agent working in the wild, and notably is not a workflow. This is, I mean, I think it's actually pretty interesting. Like, I would be curious how many people, for example, are using OpenAI's agent SDK. My sense is, my sort of hot take, I don't know, but it's actually kind of low. And the reason I claim this is because like the DX of actually declaring transitions between states, like if you've studied the spec, you actually have to decide like when like the operator agent can hand off to the service agent, can hand off to the other agent. Like that doesn't feel like what agents should do. Like it feels like an agent should be a thing that can be like, hey, here's some tools, here's this thing I want you to go do, go figure it out and come back to me when you have a question or something. Um, and I believe that's how Claude Code works. So it sure seems like agents are working in the wild in Claude Code. In terms of like the implementations I see in B2B SaaS, I'm not inspired. Um, but I think India, I think Anthropic, and particularly, I mean, I'm sure you saw Anthropic's now like 2 month old release on like making great agents. I mean, it seems like they've been very thoughtful in the space. And I mean, Cloud Code is probably an example of it.
Yep. Yeah. We talked about this a little bit, but it's almost like the DAG or the state machine concept is just a scaffold, and it's an implementation detail that maybe just like falls away as the models get smarter and smarter. And then all it is here's your objective, here are the tools that you can use and your capabilities, and then like some termination condition.
Yep.
But then I was like talking a little bit to Jeremiah, who runs the Fast MCP library. He actually mentioned sampling, by the way, as like a little like
Oh,
Easter
cool.
egg that not a lot of
Oh,
folks are using yet
no.
in MCP. But I agree with you. I think it's a really interesting new feature that could be really interesting for differentiating like what level of smartness you need for a specific
Yeah.
task and delineating between that. But I think one of his big questions was like actually like how do you figure out what the termination condition is? Like, how do you know that an AI agent is actually done and has done something
Yeah.
successfully, and has done something to the level of quality, that you want? And I think that
Yeah.
actually becomes maybe a more interesting question.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, when I saw the sort of original release of Claude Code, like the prompts were for the declaration of this task of this agent were really detailed. Like Anthropic's not joking about like how deal just like they just straight up talk to Claude. Like I think some of it's just like writing very strong prose. Just be like, if you don't know, like come back, but like if you feel confident, like keep going, buddy. But quickly and related as I don't know if you'll allow this, but as a request for startups, one candidate path that feels very interesting to me related to this sort of sampling piece is actually a formalization of it. I think just one piece of infrastructure I would just be delighted to see is like basically an extension of perhaps an open router, where a user actually doesn't have to care about the model. All she has to do is basically say like, I need high intelligence or I need high certainty of correctness. I don't quite know what the parameters would be. I want the model to maybe be a GPT model or a Gemini model. I don't really care which one it is. And I want it to be super fast and ideally pretty cheap. And this router, the most extraordinary form and markets-led form of this, and the reason why I think this actually could be a startup, because it would be potentially be creating a new inference market, but it would be one where the startup auctions off the inference completion. So basically, it's sort of like an inverse form of an ad network, where like an ad network, like basically an ad server will say, hey, there's this space on this publisher's page, and we need an ad for it. And an advertiser will bid for an opportunity to put their ad in that slot. And this form is a user has requested an AI completion of some characteristics, and inference providers are bidding for an opportunity to serve it because perhaps they have excess compute capacity, and they want to be the ones to deliver that compute, and then this router could basically make a margin on for basically assembling the demand and orchestrating the auction. But like the reason why you might wish to see that in the world, one, it'd be like great, I think nice DX, but two, could hopefully drive the cost of intelligence to zero.
Yeah, that's actually very interesting, but it's like optimizing like across geos. So, okay, like, we
Yeah.
have extra GPUs here in this geography. I feel like a Cloudflare could do this or Fly.io maybe. And then like there are a lot of folks like SF Compute that are focused on how do we create like a marketplace for GPUs, and like a spot market for GPUs. It's been a little bit more on the training side, I think, not less so on inference, but um I could see that actually being really interesting. I think, I mean, with that, it's always been I mean, on the training side, it's always been tough because it's like, okay, there's actually like data that needs to be moved
Yep.
between geographies if you actually want to take advantage of GPUs in another geography. There's probably like some really smart way to like arbitrage and balance across the geos, like without actually moving the data, kind of like what TransferWise does, where it's like the money never doesn't actually go across country lines. It just there are pools of capital in both places, and that's how they do the currency transfer. So it's probably like something kind of akin to that. That's the equivalent of this on the GPU side. Inference is probably easier, honestly, because you don't have all of the here. I need to move all of this data for the training run, but it's also a much smaller unit of work, and so it's a maybe that's actually better because it's more liquid.
Yep.
That is very interesting. No, I don't think I've seen anything like that.
Yeah, maybe someone
It's a
should start
request for startups.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess maybe like a Together or like Fireworks or some of those guys that might have a reason to like they know they can compute like what the margin will be for a specific transaction might be well positioned to go do something like that. Or they know how many GPUs are already warmed up that have a specific model loaded into it at any given
Yep.
time in any specific geo.
They'd be well positioned to do it if incentivized.
Yeah.
It depends upon where their margins come from.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's so many options right now for like where to go get inference, it's like, and then you kind of just pick whichever vendor is offering you cheapest and lowest latency. It's been kind of, I think that market is like quickly, it's not getting commoditized, but I think the margins are getting compressed and it's just hard to, it's a very, very competitive market.
Yep. Yep.
Cool. What did we miss? Do you have any other thoughts on like the future of LLMs, of AI? Um, when do you think we're going to get to AGI? I'm actually curious. Can we get to AGI with the current transformer architecture?
Well, so yeah, I mean, what is AGI? I mean, I think I can't remember who posed this. Like the completion, like the AI completion of economically valuable work, like feels like a pretty reasonable definition. I mean, it sure seems like I don't know. I think it's Yasin. I'm sorry to quote him, but Yasin on X. He's very funny. I mean, I Yasin has been saying we have AG, we've had AGI for a long time, maybe even since GPT-4, and maybe it sort of follows. And I've sort of intuitively felt for your comment that, and maybe putting it pejoratively, that maybe most white collar work is slop. That like actually like the white collar work that we all do, it's like actually not that complicated. AI can do it, and rather we're just sort of getting hamstrung around like egos and politics of like could we just like pull the ripcord and just do the thing already. So I don't know. It sure feels like the models, like particularly Claude 4 is amazing. I've spent less time with O3 is very good. I've spent less time with the Gemini models. People seem very impressed. Like it sure seems like AI today could help solve help complete a lot of economically valuable work. Now, does this mean? And I've been very disappointed to see like well, I think they've dissipated, but the VC narratives of because you're replacing human labor, that means that the market is huge. I think that's completely wrongheaded. Like I'm reminded of I always forget his name. I think it's like Shopify's chief strategy officer, the guy who used to run Social Capital. He wrote a blog in 2016 called "The Intro to Abundance." I love it. Was a 3-series blog, but indeed abundance is quite important. If you believe in AGI, essentially you believe in a future of like intelligence abundance, and you should probably have a view on like sort of how capitalism works under intelligence abundance. I wish I could remember his name, but he defines, and I think it's important. Well, from first principles, you should define capitalism. Capitalism is the delivery of shareholder value by the abundant provision of scarce resources. Now, if intelligence is now abundance, like I don't think like the relevant market to be calculating is well how much we were spending on human labor in the past. Like it doesn't seem right. It seems like if intelligence is truly abundant, then like everything is going to go to zero. in terms of relative value. But my sense is that AGI is here, and that it's just like there's just resistance to it. That there's like a cultural and political resistance to it. Um, I mean, I think those Anthropic guys are right, that even if the model stopped, we could do a ton. Like, there's so much to do with the existing models. But I'm very excited for the models to continue to get better, and for people to continue to collect more. I mean, exactly as the Anthropic folks said, to collect more and more data from the relevant domains to just automate all the things. I want to spend time on the
Yeah.
beach.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think a lot, I mean, knowledge work has, there's like that law that work just kind of expands to fill the amount of time allotted, but I think like a lot of the white collar work that has been creative, a lot of it is actually a lot of coordination. There are a lot of coordination challenges. Like if you look at the role of like a product manager or a project manager or like those types of roles that are kind of like pretty highly paid, like middle management type of roles, those are all coordination roles. And it's because the teams have gotten so big, you need someone who can just make sure like everyone is on the same page about like the timeline and where we're going and what we're doing, and where we're going. But like, I guess like if you were in a world where like the team is just all AI agents, then like the coordination challenges actually maybe go down because you can tell all of those folks like exactly what it is. They never forget what the mission is. They're like all working towards something, and it's a little bit more coordinated, and the teams also get smaller because
Yep.
they're smaller human teams, and so the coordination challenges actually go away. That's one thing that could be kind of like an interesting version of the future. But I still haven't seen like maybe there still feels like there's a missing layer, which is an AI like operating system that controls and manages business strategy, like all of the AI agents underneath it. So AKA it can orchestrate all of the AI agents underneath it. But it understands like the mechanisms of the business. AKA like if I
Mm.
increase marketing spend, that causes XYZ downstream, and it kind of understands the mechanics of the actual business. And the human can be like, hey, like I want to make blue t-shirts, and the AI agent can go out and like find
Yeah.
that blue t-shirts are like not the best idea to make, but if you want to make blue t-shirts, you can make the blue t-shirts. You should just right size it so that you're making fewer blue t-shirts, or you're spending less on marketing
Sure.
or whatever, and then just right size the business so that it's actually profitable. Like that layer of almost like business level strategy orchestration to orchestrate all of the underlying AI agents, I haven't really seen yet.
My
um,
my
Go
sense is
for
that like
it.
I don't know. My sense is that that's really just Claude code. I mean, yeah, I'm a big Claude
Yeah.
code fan. This is not. To be clear, I tried to get into Codex for whatever reason in Terminal. Like I was rejected for some reason, and I just haven't jumped in. So this is not hate for Codex. It's just I've just loved Claude code. But my so I don't know. My sense is like Claude code is like a way to bootstrap into the world you're describing. And like my intuition really follows from I don't know if you happen to study any analysis or pure math, but like my sense really follows like from like for example from like Riemannian integration. Like in order to like measure the area under a curve, you first start with blocks, and in order to get a better estimate of the area under the curve, you make the boxes finer and finer until it basically the estimated area under the curve that you've collected by just measuring boxes, because that's super easy, starts to get very close to the actual the margin of error that you set forth for yourself in the first place. And like code is a really nice place to start. It's sort of like boxes in the sense that like all code is sort of ostensibly all verifiable, and so you can sort of say like I issued this command, like does it run? Is this sort of what I expected? Like I think you could maybe say that at least does it run is certainly verifiable. Is it what I expected? Maybe a little bit looser, but perhaps could be made to be like nicely bound in a feedback loop. And then I think just like expanding beyond the sort of traditionally verifiable loops into something that's a little bit fuzzier, like business, doesn't seem like a huge jump to me. Like it sort of seems like this is really just like choose your maybe Claude, because indeed if you studied Claude Code's code base, you'll notice that they have a few. There is like Claude Code does have declared like a few specific types of agents, which I thought was sort of surprising. But they have like like an architect agent, for example. Yeah, I think whenever you see like constants in anything, certainly in pure math, whenever you see constants, it's like quite surprising that they would exist. And so I think it's very similarly, if you look at an agent framework and you see like a declared specific type of agent, I think it's something you should raise your eyebrows at and like pay attention to. But it feels like basically this pattern of declaring a few, but declaring a few specific agents for the operating of a business is probably just an extension of like basically making the models better and like a soft extension of cloud code. That'd be my expectation of what it would be.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, code is verifiable, but also like not that verifiable. I mean, it is mostly verifiable. Like you can run the unit test, you can make sure like the functionality works. I think with the like end-to-end user testing, it gets a lot of harder, especially like if you're trying to make the, does the thing actually look good? Like Cursor is like really, really bad at like making CVGs, for example. Like you're trying to make like a path or a line, like can't do that. Can't
Yep.
do that like at all. And like UIs, it doesn't make very well. And that's like more user accepting, maybe more like taste-based type of stuff. But perhaps like I think anything that can be distilled into something verifiable, I guess, is fair game. And so then the more that we can distill things into verifiable like equations, I think that's works better. But like even in like a business context, for example, like what a business does is dependent on, there's a game theory aspect to it, which is like it also depends on what your competitors do. And like the optimal strategy in a specific context could be very different depending on what everyone else does. And then
Yeah.
when you throw that component into it, if humans are chaotic, going back to our original point about whether or not humans are predictable or not, that actually throws the wrench into it that makes it a
Well,
lot more challenging to figure out what to do.
I guess I would sort of I would turn back to your original observation or your sort of middle observation of like, does AI just sort of flatten everything and just like basically empower people to create a bunch of businesses? Like I think you can also like get this from studying George Akerlof and was that, no, not Akerlof, is it Akerlof, the no, who is the guy who has the theory of the firm? It's not Akerlof. Anyway, the in the sort of the canonical theory of the firm, so economists have studied, I think, since certainly the 70s, maybe the 50s, like why does the firm exist? Why are there bigger firms versus smaller firms? And it's all to the ends of minimizing transaction costs. Like a firm has two choices. She can either like a member of a firm can either hire sort of an outside, like contract an outside service provider to provide something, or they can just hire it from within. And the choice of it really is just dependent upon what like transactionally costs more. And to the extent that coordination costs are a contributor to firms getting bigger, like it could well be that since AI drives coordination costs quite low, it may well be that firms just become very, very small, sort of exactly as you described. And in that form, like, if firms are super small and we basically all just become like local merchants to each other and we just like start a bunch of small businesses and we create like the knitting company that we all wanted. I mean, not me, but I don't know. Like I've seen some millennials say they want to start a knitting company and just sell to their friends. Like maybe that's like the firms that end up starting to exist. And in that world, like, are you really thinking about like competitive strategy or just like making shit because your friends like it?
Yeah, that's a good point, because then you're just buying as a form of patronage. Like your sweaters are super ugly, but I'll still buy them because I love you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's funny. And then and maybe Stripe is the merchant of record for all of them anyways. Joke's on us.
Yeah, so payments is a great place to sit. Yeah, or pro Bitcoin. I mean, it depends. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Okay, cool. Well, thank you, Soren, so much for joining us. Any last thoughts, closing words? Where do people find you?
Sure. People can find me at HyperSoren on X, Soren at Crosshatch.io. Yeah, and excited to go live in and create the future with everybody.
Cool. Thanks again, Soren.